Give your body the support it needs. Doesn't need a pep talk of like, you need to do more, buck it up, or let's push through this. It actually, you probably need a pep talk of, okay, it's okay to do less. It's okay not to do as much as I have been doing. I'm in a season of healing, and that's okay. And that's enough. And I am enough. I don't need to push. Hey, beautiful soul, and welcome to Dear Body, I'm Listening, the podcast for women living with chronic illness, invisible symptoms, and the quiet grief of feeling dismissed in your own body. I'm Donna Piper, and here we tell the truth about healing, the messy parts, the hopeful parts, and the parts no one prepared us for. This is a space for real talk, nervous system safe support, and learning to trust your body again, one breath at a time. Hey, beautiful soul, and welcome back to Dear Body, I'm Listening. So as promised, today I'm going to be talking about Chapter 10 in Dr. Perrin's book. So if you follow along the podcast in chronological order, then last week I spoke about the Perrin Technique, Chapter 1. It's from his book, and he is Dr. Raymond Perrin, and it's from the second edition. So this week, I'm talking about Chapter 10, because in his book, he references that if you are a patient, then skip to 10 and then 11 in the chapters after reading Chapter 1. He also has a companion guide, but the book that I'm going over is over 500 pages, so there's a lot of dense information. He writes this for practitioners, doctors, people that want to know more about it. So there's a lot of information in here, and it's written for a lot of different people. However, if you have ME, and if you have severe ME, like I did when I first started, reading this much information was like, good luck. I couldn't even hold the book or make sense of the words on the page, let alone take in over 500 pages of information, understand that and deal with it. So the companion book was nice because I was also able to give that to my husband and have him read it so he could understand a little bit more about what I was going through and what the process is. And I wouldn't have to try to tell him. So that's what we're getting into today is Chapter 10. And Chapter 10 is all about his technique. So it's written for practitioners, so other osteopaths, doctors, physiotherapists. Maybe you have a MLD and occupational therapist that also does these manual techniques. So this is a manual technique. We're going to talk about it. There's a self-guided physical movements you could do on yourself, but it is good to find someone that is certified in the Perrin technique, or maybe an osteopath, because some of these things, like you said, he didn't make them up specifically for this. It was based out of his work. So these are osteopath techniques that he's used before. He just puts them in a certain sequence to help your body start to drain the toxins out of your body to improve your health. So basically today what we're going to go over is Chapter 10, but why Chapter 10? That's the next chapter. And why people with ME/chronic fatigue syndrome, whether you have it or not, if you ended up in his office or with his technique, or maybe you have fibromyalgia, this might be a treatment for you, whether you've heard about it or not. What the treatment really is, in his words, I'm going to paraphrase it because the chapter is really long and there's a lot of information about, like lying on your side or doing this. So I'm going to paraphrase it a little bit. I will leave also links to the book and also his website where he really does a good job of going over piece by piece of what to do for the self-guided technique to help. Because it is important that you all, for me, I did this technique I paid someone to do this technique for me once a week, and I still do. And then I also do the same sort of self-treatment every day. And I do it less now that I've had symptoms, but I notice when my symptoms have started creeping back in the last few weeks that I need to start really doing this again because it does help a lot. And the one thing I want to say about all of this is it's not medical advice. I'm going over a book. It's my lived experience with it after actually actively being treated as a patient on the table and doing it myself. And it's not just this technique, but the idea and the philosophy that I had to get in my head over and over again is pain equals no gain. More equals no gain. More actually makes me worse. Having bursts of energy might be great, but if I go with that and use it all up because, when you're sick and you don't have energy, those like moments of energy are like gold, right? Or whatever you want to say, but you really want to use them. You want to use it all up. It's like, oh, I feel better. I can do all this stuff. But that actually puts back your healing because it's really about like, okay, I feel better today. So you're looking over the long term, the gestalt, an overview, not just moment to moment. So remembering, okay, good, I'm having a good day. Let me continue with my treatments. Let me do the activities that I can also do when I'm not feeling well, and then that's enough. And that's a really hard thing because most people that have this condition are by nature overachievers. They do more. We want to do more. We're used to doing more. We're not used to doing so little, and it feels like we're not doing anything when in fact we're doing a great deal. So that's the main thing I want to. This chapter actually emphasizes that, and I'll be stating it over and over again in this episode. So I also want to say that this is a time, like, you're not looking at this treatment. I know we love social media and things quick, and now with AI, everything's quick. We could get all this information, right? However, for healing, you want to look at it as a few years that you're going to be doing this. It's taken a long time to get the sick in most cases. So it does take a while to get better. This is not a miracle. This is not do these 3 things or do this and you're going to feel all better instantly. If you do these things and it makes you feel better, and as he says in this, you probably are going to feel worse because you're going to be detoxing. Some of these toxins are going to be coming out, so you might feel worse. And then that is how you know that it's working. It's not just a placebo effect because as you start to move toxins through your body, you may start to feel kind of icky. And you're like, oh, why am I doing this? You don't want to do so much that it's not like flood your system with toxins. It's really a gentle movement, and it's a way to see your healing over the long term and recognize small patterns that get better and better over time and you can sustain. So then you're kind of, if you were looking at it like a Lego set or something, like you have this foundation where you do this. And then as you start to get better, you get more and more blocks. Probably a really horrible analogy, but that's all I thought of. So that's really what I want to talk about, like what it is. So I could try to be as specific as possible so you know, and then also tell you that this is just one way of healing. And in my case, it was a 3-year prognosis of getting better. He was like, you know, most people go once a week for 12 weeks and then go every other week. You're probably not going to have that. You're lucky if it's every 6 months or you do once a week for 6 months. I actually did once a week for about a year, and I'm still doing this intermix. I'm lucky that my Perrin Technique therapist is also my MLD therapist. I have multiple issues here. So she fortunately does both. So right now we're focusing on making sure my legs don't have swelling and fibrosis, and they're getting what they need after recovering from surgery. And I'm going into for surgery next week. So this is the long haul. And he even told me that. He's like, it's going to take you about 3 years. But if you do my technique, if you do what I suggest, then you will get better. And in 3 years, you'll be all better. That's why I'm sharing it, because it has been very powerful in my recovery, and I want as many people to know about it. So, with that, come sit with me and let me tell you about Chapter 10. Real talk, the part where we tell the truth and keep it tender. So, one of the hardest things about ME/chronic fatigue syndrome is not just the symptoms. It's not just the fatigue, which, by the way, is already a lot, right? And fatigue doesn't encompass what it really is. It's not just you're tired, right? And if you have it, you know, you know. It is the way this condition scrambles our sense of our trust, because we don't function the same way, right? We don't trust our body. We don't trust our effort. We usually don't trust our doctors, because if you're fortunate enough to finally get a true ME/chronic fatigue syndrome diagnosis, you probably went through a million other things before they recognized this, right? And you might just have not trusted any other treatments, because things, I know for myself, there's dozens of things that I've tried that everyone swears by, like, oh, do this thing, you feel better. Like acupuncture was one of them. And I didn't. I put a lot of money in faith, and I was like, okay. A lot of my friends that had mystery stuff going on or things I couldn't figure out, they went to this one acupuncture and it turned it all around. Well, that story times like 15 different doctors, literally, I went to was the same one. And so I started to have a mistrust in treatments. Also, it messes with your trust in your own ability to know what's helping and what's hurting. Because when you live with this, and if you have other comorbidities like I do, everything does get weird. You can have a day where you feel and seem almost like, hey, I'm okay. And then 24 hours later, you wake up and you feel like you have been hit by a truck. And you're like, what happened? I was feeling better. Why? I don't think I did anything to warrant feeling like this. And there's nothing, that kind of stuff, because your body, there's so many different systems involved, and our knowledge of it is very minuscule. And even the information from Dr. Perrin is amazing and eye-opening and great and makes a lot of sense. And even though it's our own bodies, we're not taught this way. We're not educated this way. So we don't always understand the inner workings. There's a lot of it is push through it, do more, biohack. What's a quick way, right? We're looking for all these quick ways to feel better, to change things. And in the reality, especially when you have systems that aren't working as they should and they're overstimulated and they're overtaxed, by doing more actually doesn't help you get to your optimal health. It actually prolongs it and most of the time it makes it worse, way worse. And I know I wanted my life back really badly. I couldn't figure out why I couldn't figure out how to help myself. And that turns that hope and that optimism really turns into bitterness and anger and frustration and grief. And that's a lot about when you have chronic illness. You're not just sick, and most people don't really understand it, and they try to, but they don't. And probably even listening to this, you're advice weary, right? Like, oh God, someone else telling me this thing. Well, I've lived it and I was very skeptical, but I was like, hey, I didn't even know I had this thing. Why not? He told me in my eyes, straight to my face, that he could help me if I follow his regimen and his advice. Then in 3 years, I could be better. And everything he told me made sense. He made me feel that he understood the disease. He had decades of actually seeing this work and happen. So at this point, I had literally tried everything else. And not even knowing I had this diagnosis, I said yes. And it did make me feel better. And it's taking me over a year to share this completely, because I wanted to make sure that those results were significant. They were enough to share with you. So That is why. Because most of us are sick of being told to try harder, to think better, exercise more, stress less, sleep more, sleep differently, eat cleaner, push through, rest better, maybe meditate correctly, hydrate. It is a lot. And I don't want to be another kind of person out there just say, "Hey, do this thing," because it may or may not work for you. I don't want you to like have a flicker of hope and then like a threat like, "Okay, well, what if this helps? But I don't know, can I survive something else not working?" And because that disappointment is real when you have chronic fatigue, and that tension is real. So, this could be the answer for you. This could not be, but at least listen and be educated about what it is, and then you could decide and think if it's something that you might want to take on. Because, if you've lived with chronic illness like I have for decades, 3 years sounds like a long time, but in the totality of it, 3 years, if I'm gonna feel better in 3 years, that's better than continuing down the path of trying everything and still not feeling better. The connective thread, where the body, story, and science start holding hands. Okay, so let's talk about chapter 10. So, in Dr. Perrin's model of chronic fatigue, ME healing, he also includes fibromyalgia. His belief in these cases that involves a problem with the neuro-lymphatic drainage, spinal mechanics, and an irritation or overactivity of the autonomic nervous system. So let me translate that. Basically, his model says that your systems, so your thoracic spine is too straight and rigid, which stores a lot of these, so your central nervous system and how it responds. You're stuck in a more reactive situation, so your body's constantly under stress. And then by doing more anything, whether it's emotional stress, physical stress, whatever, then that's kind of the last little drop of water that is just kind of making everything shut down. Also, your hypothalamus and your central nervous system aren't talking like they should. In addition, your body it has some drainage to get out these toxins, and there's a cerebral spinal fluid in your brain, also your lymphatic system and the lymphatic system, and that's all not working as it should. So all these things are backing up. So you have more toxins in the brain, and that's affecting all of these things that you have, and they become, and it's been doing it for a super long time before you show signs and symptoms. So there's dysfunction happening in your body where it can't get out the toxins, and in turn, those toxins are giving you these symptoms. So that's the basic kind of Donna version of it, but that's really the system. That's what happens. So when you're has some overactivation of your nervous system, there also is like inflammation, mechanical strain, and these are all specially located around your spine, neck, and thoracic area where your central nervous system is housed. And that central nervous system communicates to the brain and back and forth. And those communications are pathological, meaning they're not working as they should. So, when we talk about ME/chronic fatigue syndrome, he also talks about fibromyalgia. I don't have fibromyalgia, so I talk about it less, but this technique, he has worked with people with fibromyalgia. So, that's also there's a little bit difference. Haven't educated myself on that, so I can't really speak to that. But when you have ME/CFS, you're not just tired, you're having a whole body problem with drainage, nervous system stress, and physical dysfunction, right? And that's different than if you're, say to someone like, yeah, I have problems with my drainage, my nervous system, stress, and I have physical dysfunction, like my structure is not where it needs to be, and my body's having a hard time moving this fluid, which is full of toxins, out and tolerating any strain because I'm over my max capacity. That's much different than saying you're tired, right? So just kind of know that it's because tired, fatigue doesn't really sum up what you feel like. I know for me, when I would say I'm really tired, it was not just like, oh, take a nap. It was beyond that. My body was not able to function. And that's really what it is. And that's hard to say to people that you're having a hard time functioning, especially if you don't look sick, these invisible illnesses. That is something that, like, I know for me, I didn't really know how to describe it. I didn't have the words before I got educated about it. And so I didn't like to talk about it because I didn't always want to, have people have their opinion about how I was feeling. So let's get back to chapter 10, but this is important. That's why I talked about my sort of 2 cents because it does align with, going and finding a new technique and that your body has all these malfunctioning ways right now and you can improve them. So he starts off with really important to reduce inflammation. So he calls it contrast bathing. Basically, you do cold for 3 minutes and one warm for 1 minute, and then you change the time, and then you end up doing warm for 3 minutes. He has it outlined on page 273 of his book, and it's 10 minutes. So what happens is you're stimulating with cold and hot. You're not doing anything like extreme temperatures one way or the other. It's tolerable. So you don't want to have adverse effects. Again, we're not forcing the body to be like just jamming everything in and pulling everything out. Like how I have seen it, we're repatterning things. We're starting where the body is and allowing it to get support in order to help it drain and to get back into optimal functioning. And again, we're doing it very slowly because our system is already overtaxed. And by doing that, if we go in hard and fast and try to force, our body is not going to respond well to that. And we're not going to get the benefits of what we want. So he starts with trying to decrease the inflammation. And it's this cold bathing is going to be in your thoracic spine. And that is where he starts. So, depending on where your inflammation is and how many times you can do it, he suggests you start with at least 3 times a day of the upper thoracic region and then the lower thoracic region if you have some abdominal or lower extremities that are affected. So, try to do that 10 minutes a day, and there's a procedure. Then from there, he looks at these 10 stages of steps for the Perrin technique. So, first, he does a technique to help drain the lymphatics of your chest and your breast tissue, and then drain the cervical lymphatic vessels. And then there's gentle articulation of the thoracic region and soft tissue techniques. Then again, going back to drain the cervical lymphatics and then a soft tissue massage to relax muscle and encourage lymph drainage of the cervothoracic region. So basically, these are all gentle movements to get the flow and the fluid to the thoracic duct under the subclavicle area to get it in there. So he's doing all these gentle movements so in the way of your lymphatic system, so not against it, so to help. So he's helped gently, and this is all very gentle. And it goes back and forth. So it's not just one forceful movement, but he goes back and forth. And then he's then starts to work on working out around your suboccipital region, which is where it's basically where your spine meets your skull. That's where a lot of congestion can be. So he helps move the drainage there. And then there's an ending with the cranial sacral rhythm and cranial sacral techniques. And then again, finally, there's gentle movement to finish off moving the fluid towards the subclavicle region in order to help this drainage flow. So he talks a lot about that in depth, but basically, what you're trying to do is to have your system kind of start in it's like a pumping mechanism. He actually calls it accordion system. So it kind of starts to create these movements. So the flow is going in the right direction. All of this fluid is getting pushed gently into the area where it's going to drain. And throughout this sort of chapter, he really talks a lot in how to do that if you're a practitioner and what it kind of feels like with the treatment. And then if your technician is trained, whether he's an osteopath or something, there might be some manual manipulations to help get some movement in your spine. Or if like something is not in alignment, there might be some small adjustments. For me, she's an occupational therapist and she doesn't do any of those manipulations, but that is something that maybe you might encounter if the person that you go to is trained to do those sorts of things. And he highly suggests and states over and over again that pain equals no gain. So you're not doing anybody any favors, including yourself, if you push yourself through the pain barrier. Pain is the body's natural protection. It tells you when to stop, right? But we have think like, oh no, if pain, we need that pain. That means it's doing something. And actually what it should be doing is telling you to stop. But we have kind of got this bro gym mentality of health that we're like, no, do more, push through, be more mentally like, and that's not what we need to be doing at all if we have ME. So there is some thoracic rotation movements you could do that are very gentle to help start to get that region of the spine open up, and some shoulder movements across crawl. And it's interesting, he really does talk about hypermobility. So if you have hypermobility on any sort of spectrum, whether you're hypermobile, have hypermobile syndrome disorder or spectrum disorder, or you have hypermobility Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, the thing that he has seen, and other doctors have seen it too, when your thoracic spine is kind of stuck and rigid, which mine is, I have upper cervical instability, meaning my neck could go way far back in all these directions and it shouldn't, and it doesn't give me pain. I don't have a sense of where to stop. Same with my lower lumbar. Super flexible lower back. I don't have a sense of where to stop. So I could put myself in a hyper stretched thing and stay there for a long time and it doesn't give me any pain, but it will aggravate and give me flares by doing that. So he has a nice section in here that talks about what to do when you have upper cervical instability, meaning hypermobility of your cervical spine. And also he talks about how to deal with if you have lower back, lower lumbar hypermobility as well. Then he really talks about too this nasal release. So that's a nice place where you could do it for yourself with your elbows on the table and the pads of your index fingers on the outside of your nose, like right in the corners of your eyes. And by doing that will help this drainage. That's a drainage pathway of your brain to get out toxins. And then also a nice, easy facial and head massage that is very light, light neck massages, and then a self chest massage to figure out so you could do yourself to help bring that drainage, come it back, because you want to make kind of a vortex. You're pushing the fluid towards the major ducts and to kind of have that like do a little pull it down. And then he really gives you a nice table of things to do and for how long to do it, what kind of oil to use, etc. And then as a supplement for cranial sacral, because you can't really do that on yourself, he does give you a position of lying on a hard book. And he gives instructions about how thick the book should be, depending on what you need and what your symptoms are, and how long to do that, and how it helps kind of also regulate that pathway. So he's really trying to restructure and to get more mobility in your thoracic spine to help your brain and your central nervous system start talking better, and then helping the toxins that are stuck in there start to flow where they need to get unstuck, and then also start to train your body of how it needs to flow so the flow doesn't get backed up, those toxins don't get backed up. And then in addition, he really talks about patients are advised to avoid stress, whether physical, mental, emotional, etc., whenever possible. And that is a big part of his protocol, is to really reduce all stressors in your life. He talks about diet and nutrition, but he goes more into chapter 5. And so when I go back into those chapters, we'll delve into it more. But the one thing he really does say is, and I'm quoting from his book, is patients should eat regularly and healthy meals and drink plenty of healthy fluids, such as water, at least 2 waters a day for adults. And he absolutely says that alcohol is a no if you have ME/CFS for 2 fundamental reasons. And I quote from this: "The detrimental effects of alcohol has on the liver are well documented, and it's known that alcohol is the main cause of cirrhosis and liver disease. The main aim of the Perrin technique is to drain toxins out of the central nervous system into the lymphatic system. The lymphatics will eventually drain the toxins into the bloodstream, with most ending up in the liver, which will need support rather than a further toxic load provided by alcohol." So, even a small amount of alcohol aggravates ME/CFS and FMS due to its effect on the brain. Right? So, because of all of this, and he talks more into how things are broken down, alcohol is definitely something that should not be introduced into your system if you have ME. It's just does not help you in any way. And then he talks some general about some supplements, vitamin C and B complex, and again, he talks about, like, how that is, so you guys could get the book or go onto his website and he'll talk more, but I'm gonna do this whole chapter 5 about all this, so really I'm just kinda giving you an overview. He also then talks about how things get maybe worse before it gets better, and then he gives a very nice description of how the prognosis and the frequency of treatment. So, when you do a self-assessment, and if you're assessed by someone physical, like how severe you are, you get a score from 1 to 10. So, 10 is like you're symptom free, right? There's no restrictions. 1 is extreme symptoms with signs for more than a year, totally bedridden, sitting all day, little cranial flow that they could feel. And that's like a 3-year plus diagnosis. Because I have comorbidities as well, my score was a 3 when I met him, and it says severe symptoms and signs for more than a year, resting most of the day, and little cranial flow. So in his book, it was, like, in generally 2 years, but for me, it was 3 years. So, he talks about how long, and as you kinda go up, if you started at a 3 like I do, as you go up to 8, 10, so it's a little scale there. But depending on how you come in, maybe if you're a 9, you have slight lymphatic engorgement and experience of mild symptoms following overexertion. Maybe you only have to do it for 3 months. But typically, you don't really get diagnosed that early with ME, so it's probably going to be a lot longer. So he also talks about how he does his scoring system, and then he talks about the different scores and how you get 1 out of 10 or 7 out of 10, etc. And then he has a nice reference in here to patients, what their comorbidities were, if there were any, how old they were when they got diagnosed, and how long it took them. And throughout the book, he does that too. He has a lot of patient stories. So it's not just him saying, "This is my great theory and I do this great work." You also hear from his patients. Then he talks about children, which I don't have any children, so we'll just leave that if you want to get the book. And he gives some nice statistics of how many patients he's seen with this, what their average score is, and how they've progressed as far as some of his clinical trials that he's done. So that's a lot of information, but I am going to leave a link to the book and also the link to the self guide, which talks a lot about it. Mythbuster moment, because some of what we've been told is absolute nonsense. Today's myth is this: if treatment is really helping, it should feel intense. I'd have to say no. That's a gym culture in like a lab coat, and a lot of sick women have been harmed by it. We've been taught to believe that more pressure means more progress, that soreness equals success, that exhaustion means you've tried hard enough, right? And that if something is gentle, it must be weak or it's not working or it's not worth your time. And that's absolute nonsense, especially when you have ME/chronic fatigue syndrome or any other chronic illness, because ME is one of those conditions that punishes excess. So does a few other conditions as well that I've talked about ad nauseum. But too much stimulation, that's a problem. Too much activity is a problem. Cognitive effort is also a problem. Too much emotional stress, a problem. Too much treatment, believe it or not, is also a problem. And the Perrin framework, at least as described by him and my experience, is actually pretty clear. The treatment is supposed to be adapted to the individual, done gently, and adjusted if reactions are too strong. Home care is meant to be gentle and consistent, not provocative. It is not about being more. The lifestyle piece emphasizes pacing, not proving. And that is a very big part of it. He really wants your environment and your caregivers, and he wants you to have caregivers and to do way less than you think. So that is really also part of chapter 10 was the technique, what physically is done. But this is also part of it that is really, for me, it was the hardest part. And most women, it's a hard part to get around that. Even if I have energy, I have to figure out how to not overdo it because that'll set me back. Because if your body's already overwhelmed, why would the answer automatically be more overwhelmed, right? And that's the myth I want to challenge. More it is not better. More is just more. And most of the time, that more makes you push, makes you ignore your symptoms. But like if you also have a hard time at like you have dysautonomia, sometimes you don't even know that you're pushing yourself. So there's so many things that go on that you really need to get into a whole mindset shift and a whole different paradigm of doing less on purpose is the point. And restraint is a very, very advanced healing skill. It's not sexy. It's not like, okay, restrain yourself. That's usually not what you hear. Like, do more, do this, get up, do this routine, add more stuff to your life to simplify it. No, having wisdom of restraint of like, okay, I could do this, but what is it going to cost me? And right now I'm healing and I have X amount of years that I'm doing this healing thing. So how can I start to learn to do just XYZ other than through A through Z? And another myth tucked inside of this whole conversation is the idea that healing should look obvious. And if you're doing the quote unquote right treatment, you should be able to post a triumph update by next Thursday with glowy skin and a ring light testimony, right? There's a lot of that, like, oh, look at me. I did this for X amount of days and, I'm highly improved. A lot of time that's not true. And again, no. Some healing is microscopic at first, and you can't see the healing that it's doing inside of your body, right? You may notice you're crashing less violently, they're less extreme. You may see that you recover a little faster. Maybe you could sit up, longer. You can have a longer conversation. Maybe you could start to read things and have it kind of stay in your brain and you remember it. It's not so hard just to read something. Your nervous system doesn't feel like it's being chased down by a bear every afternoon, or maybe you have slightly more room between effort and consequence. And that is really where the nuances are, and that's what counts, and that's how you're building and repairing your body and healing. So don't let internet or what you think you should do or a time frame bully you into thinking subtle progress is fake progress. And one more myth, because, I'm feeling like that today. If something doesn't work for everyone, it must be useless. That's also nonsense because bodies are different. Illness histories are different. Timing is different. Resources are different. Practitioners are different. Comorbidities are different. The existence of nuance does not mean an option has no value. It means discernment matters. So the Perrin Technique does not have to be the answer for you, but I think it's still worth understanding because he does describe the process of when these toxins build up and how to help you get these toxins to where they need to be and how to really live in a way of less is more and pain equals no gain. Feel good flow. One small shift, one safer breath, one thing to take with you. So let's land this in your body today, not in theory, everything I've been talking about. So just allow yourself to just sit wherever you are. Just make sure you're not driving or doing anything that's going to require your attention. Get in a comfortable space and let your tongue soften away from the roof of your mouth. Let it expand. Just take one deep breath and try not to fixate on anything. Just breathe. And as you breathe with each exhale, see if you can make it just a little bit longer. And now ask yourself, what if healing for me is not about pushing harder? What if healing is about supporting my body more skillfully? And just notice what comes up. There could be some grief there, maybe some relief, maybe some skepticism. But maybe that makes sense not into your brain, but your body. Maybe you feel a more sense of calmness or peacefulness or a tiny bit of joy about that. Maybe you feel like, oh, some of the pressure's taken off. And all that is welcome. Everything that you feel about it is welcome. And that's how you know, okay, all right, this is where I'm at with my healing. This is where I'm at with potentially trying something new. So if you have ME and any sort of treatment you're going through, whether it's Perrin Technique or not, try to pick a practice as less is more this week. Just one thing. Not trying to do an overhaul of everything. Just pick one thing and see if you could start taking a break or doing less of that thing other than more of it and see if that helps you in your whole system. So, if you know that working out for X amount of time, you feel more tired the next like 2 or 3 days, see if you could shorten that workout, right? Maybe do the whole hour, but do less reps. Or if it's a group class somewhere, do the whole class, but with less intensity, right? Take more breaks, even if it goes against the grain. Or maybe drink a little bit more water, maybe a little more regularly. That's my big thing. I have a hard time eating as much as I should. So that's probably one I should pick. And just notice, your body. Do you have a collapsed posture right now? If you have hypermobility in your neck, like, can you do those little exercises that he mentions in his book or on his website? Or maybe just spend a little bit more time lying down. And when you lie down, just enjoy. Like, okay, I'm not trying to think of a million things of why I shouldn't be lying down or what I should be doing instead. But like, okay, I need to lie down. So let me really embody and enjoy lying down because that's what my body needs. And remember every day just to really try to breathe and give your body the support it needs. doesn't need a pep talk of like, you need to do more, buck it up, or let's push through this. It actually, you probably need a pep talk of, okay, it's okay to do less. It's okay not to do as much as I have been doing. I'm in a season of healing, and that's okay. And that's enough. And I am enough. I don't need to push. This is shared education and lived experience, not medical advice, and is not meant to be. Check in with your body, check in with your clinician, and find out what fits your life. So that's basically the Perrin Technique, Chapter 10, with a little bit of, or probably a lot of it, of my interpretation of it. It's not a miracle. I mean, I feel like it was a miracle that I found him and I found the other missing piece of my chronic illness puzzle, because I was doing all the things that I should to treat my other chronic illnesses, and I still was feeling worse and worse. So it's not nonsense. It really kind of ties in with my others treatments and other doctors that I've listened to. Everything that he says has now been supported by scientific research, and he theorized this decades ago. And really, it was more about how he put together his treatments as an osteopath to help. But just remember that ME, chronic fatigue syndrome, is more just fatigue, right? And what we do, or specifically what we don't do, actually aids in more healing. So doing less equals faster, better outcomes. So if you know anyone that also has chronic fatigue syndrome or fibromyalgia, and they might be interested in learning a little bit more about the Perrin Technique and this chapter, please, as always, share with them, and in great gratitude. I appreciate you listening, and I hope you have a beautiful week. And until next time, dear body, I'm listening. Thanks for listening to Dear Body, I'm Listening. If this episode helped you feel a little more seen, a little more steady, or a little less alone in what your body has been carrying, share it with someone who might need that too. And remember, there's nothing wrong with you. You've just been living in a body that hasn't been understood. Until next time, keep listening gently.